When we make a change, in a sense, we're allowing something new. We're awakening something new in ourselves. You could talk about the letting go of the old too, but the real important part is we're allowing something new to come out. My truth is that that thing is already kind of latent inside of ourselves, and now it's coming out. We're allowing it out. And when I mean change, maybe we're learning to stand in our personal power, or we're walking with our heart open, or we're allowing more intimacy into our relationships, or we're speaking our truth more, or we're allowing ourselves to be part of a community where we used to be more isolated or something. When all of these things, they're a change, but they all feature allowing this new part of ourselves to come out. Okay, it's allowing ourselves to be more whole, and allowing this part of ourselves to awaken and then we're nurturing it. And a lot of the nurturing I really compare to like a seedling, like it could be just one of those little seedlings that's a tree, or even maybe one of your bean plants in your vegetables. When they're just really tiny little things, they're so vulnerable. And there's this thing, we water them and we nurture them and we protect them from being stepped on by your pet or eaten by a deer or whatever else. It's like we because then it gets stronger, it's less vulnerable. It has some momentum, and it's got sturdier stem. If it's a tree, it's getting taller, and it can, it can blow in the wind, and it now is less vulnerable. It's more established in its newness. It's not really new anymore, but this new part of themselves is now established, so it's less vulnerable. So, so what is it vulnerable to? Okay. And well, a lot of things, but I want to focus on one thing here. Is what it's really vulnerable to is being drawn back into that old way of being. Because if we are like learning to stand in our power, or walking with our hearts open, and trusting our heart rather than our minds for things, or allowing ourselves to be more genuine and intimate in our relationships. I mean, they seem like maybe not so big things, but these are revolutionary things, okay? In ourselves and in the people around us. And there's a real tendency, we have this comfort zone in that old way of being. Even if we weren't happy, it still was comfortable. And the people around us were comfortable to some extent with the old way that we were. And so now it's like we introduce this new thing, and people are like, "What? That's not like you. That's different." Now they have to refigure out who we are, and we have to figure out new skills and how to navigate through life. And so it's really easy to get talked out of, often by a family member, a friend, or whatever else. It's like, it's easy to kind of get taught. We go to this cool workshop or this retreat, and we come back and we're going to awaken this new thing. And then we get in the daily grind of our life, and we kind of get drawn back into the old thing. I'm sure none of us have done that before. I know I have. And it's a painful thing, when we realize, then we come back again to it again, and it's like, oh, I was here before, and I allowed myself to get drawn back in. That's what it's vulnerable to, and that's why we need to nurture it. We need to create like a nurturing environment so this thing can grow and get strong. And then once it gets established, it's no longer as threatened to go back, into the old way. So now if you look at our culture, like, well, let's do this instead. So if we were in an Aboriginal culture, say we were in an Aboriginal culture in Australia or in South America, primitive culture in South America, or a Native American, and I'm talking about a culture that's intact, maybe it's hundreds of years ago, maybe it's a culture that's still, that's still active. I think of like the Dances with Wolves culture, that was there, and so a healthy Aboriginal culture that is still, it's survived, the colonialism and all that stuff. I mean, it's still in this healthy form. And it's like when a young woman or a young man would get to be about 12, 13 years old, they would do an initiation ceremony into, into adulthood. And they would do this really cool ceremony, and it would be this line of demarcation. It's just like usually they all have like the boy dies and the man is born, that type of thing. And they do these really cool ceremonies. I love those types of ceremonies. But the important part for this video is that from that moment on, when they cross over from the girl to the woman, say they cross over a line, and then they there's some symbolic way that they make that transition. It's a moment in time that they cross over. It's like the boy, the boy dies, the man is born, and so when they make that change, okay, everyone in the clan started, they'll get a new name, a new identity, and everyone in the clan starts interacting with them in a different way. So now it was very disrespectful to, once they made that change, to start treating her like a little girl again. That was just not even tolerated, in that culture, because they took this stuff so seriously. Everyone started, the young woman would get new tasks. She had a new way, she had new roles of how she fit into the clan, and everyone honored her as a woman now and not a little girl anymore. And so that was, and then that allows this new sprout to grow, right? Because it's being reinforced from everyone, and it's being it happens relatively quickly, because they're in their daily routine. Everything revolves around being a young woman now. And so there's very little danger of getting drawn back into a little girl. If they start doing that, the shaman or whatever comes up and has a talk with her and just say, hey, you're not a little girl anymore. You've got to step up. We need you as a woman. Your people need you, And well, anyway, if you enter our contemporary culture, okay, and I'm talking, from the United States, but, wherever, most people are probably watching this from the United States. But anyway, if you look at a contemporary culture, we'll call it, okay, and Western European, American contemporary culture, whatever. And we don't really do that anymore. We don't live in clans. We don't have villages and communities that support these things. So, and I think that's actually kind of a tragic thing. I think that's one of the reasons that we're really missing and why people are having a rough time right now, but that's another talk. And but anyway, so what we have to do is we have to create nurturing environments for our seedling ourselves. We have to create a nurturing environment. We have to create a group of people that are willing to support this new part of us. Okay, and that's why we do these sharing circles too. It is like there's a thing in the sharing circle where everyone in that circle agrees to nurture the new part of you, kind of like in the Aboriginal culture, right? And so we have to create that ourselves. So how do we do that? We have to, find people, and they're not always our family and friends. It's the family and friends that are willing to support something new in us. May not be our parents, may not be our kids. They may need us to be the same, And so we need kind of forward thinking, if you will, people and friends and family members, significant others that are willing to allow that new part of you to grow. And then you can create this new environment, and you can ask yourself, like, what nurtures this new part of you? What nurtures standing in your power? What nurtures walking with your heart open? Maybe spending time in nature. That usually is a pretty safe bet. Maybe we spend more time in nature. Maybe, and how do we create an environment that sustains and allows this sprout to grow? And you can even ask a little thing that you can do. You can ask that part of you. It's almost like talking to your inner child or something. You can ask that part of you, hey, new guy that walks with his heart open. I'm talking to myself here. It's like, does this going to this party, going to this scene, does this nurture you? You know, and so how does it answer? It usually answers by either you feel like, yes, I'm drawn to that thing, or no, no, I don't want to, the thought of being in that environment does not feel good, you know. Or maybe it's just kind of neutral and apathetic, and that means, you know, it doesn't really, it's a neutral environment. It's not really supportive, but it's not really unsupportive. And that, you know, and so it's usually one of those three things. And so you ask this, it's like, okay, is this a good place to nurture? Does this nurture you? Does this group of friends, does going to this barbecue, you know, where they're drinking beer, which does that, maybe it does, you know, is that a good place for the new Mike? You know, and it's like, you know, and you ask, and then it doesn't mean you don't go, but it's like, but then, you know, you might go, but then you don't really expose that new part of yourself as much. But then you do need some places in your life where you do expose that new part of yourself so it can learn some new skills, because this new part of you needs to learn a whole new way of navigating through life. So that's enough for now. I could keep going, but that is our video for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome week. And I'd invite you to think about nurturing environments for a new part of yourself, or your heart, like what nurtures you and what doesn't so much nurture that new part of you. I will see you in a week.